just taking a quick look at the 70Mi Hiker 400. So this is a new model from 70Mi. You know, it came out with the Tera 1000 last year. And, you know, just like that model, this one actually has some quite innovative features to it, some unique designs. This is kind of something that 70Mi is kind of known for, doing some different things, right? And just trying to bring some innovation to these power stations. So yes, you know, when you first look at this thing, it looks just kind of like a basic, generic, cheap power station, really. But yeah, so let's just kind of, there are some things to kind of talk about here, so let's just kind of talk about them. All right, and for the specs here, you know, Hiker 400 is the name, so we get almost 400 watt hours, 378, and that 400 watt pure sine wave inverter. And then, you know, this is a pretty small power station. In fact, this thing is about the same size and weight as that new Jackery 300 Plus. Now, as you can imagine, since we are getting a little bit more capacity in comparison to that, this thing is using NMC batteries, but they do have, you know, really good thermal management on this thing. In fact, it's kind of one of the standout features. We'll kind of talk about that here more in a second. But, you know, basically, you know, keeping the NMC batteries cool, you're going to get more life cycles out of them. And they do rate it as 1,000 life cycles on this thing. And so here we go, you know, quiet design. So this is kind of interesting. They actually mentioned down here in the listing somewhere that 35 decibels. So that's, you know, that's pretty quiet if that's true. You know, that's pretty quiet. Now this is interesting too, because 70Mi, their other model, the Tera 1000, was kind of really known for having this innovative heat sink design at the top of the giant heat sink, really, and a giant fan as well. That hardly ever ran. So this is they're kind of following in that footstep. Now, one thing to note with this though is that I believe the fans kind of run a lot with this unit, which was not the case with the Tera 1000. So they make very little noise, but they're probably going to run a lot. So that might be, if you're super sensitive, that might be something to note. Now here's something else that I'd really like to see. They're actually specifically calling out that they're using Bluetooth low energy wireless connection for the app. So that's interesting because, you know, I've talked about this, you know, it's nice to have the app and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, whatever, you know, for these power stations to kind of remote monitor them. But guess what? You're going to be using some of the battery power to power those things, right? So this is interesting, you know, low energy Bluetooth. It's just a really good idea. But the real standout feature here is, and I'm kind of surprised to kind of just see it, this is the only mention of it in this listing, just down here in the corner. This is awesome. I mean, you know, if you follow that channel, I love talking about the lights on these power stations. Well, this is probably the best one I've seen so far. This is the ultimate setup. Basically, there's the light on the back of the unit, which, you know, check that box. That's where I like to see it. It's a large light too, right? I mean, it's a big panel light, a lot of diffused light on there. But guess what? The big thing, the big standout feature with this is not only is it infinitely adjustable with the app there, but guess what? You can actually change the color tone. So you can go from warm to cool tone, you know, so that kind of the cool tone's more of like that daylight type of light. And then the warm tone's going to be that softer light, that more orange amberish light, right? So depending on what kind of mood you're in, you know, or depending on what you're doing, you know. Now just looking at all the outlet ports and the charging input and stuff like that real quick here. The DC input, yes, they're still using a power brick with this unit. It does somewhere around 80-90 watts. Now the solar, kind of interesting. They're using Anderson on a small power station like this. I'm a big fan of Anderson, so that's something we don't always see too much, especially on smaller power stations. Now the input, you know, is still quite limited, but still I like to see a good solid connection like that instead of just using the barrel port. And as they show here in this little diagram, they're showing two 100 watt solar panels hooked up together in parallel. They're using like these kind of branch or Y adapters there. So definitely parallel. They don't give the voltage specs on this unit, but, you know, we can safely assume that it's probably somewhere around, you know, 25 volt max. So yeah, so they got to hook them up in parallel, but still, if you do that, they do mention that you can do up to 120 watts going into this thing. So this would be a good idea, right? These panels here would probably give you like 65 watts each. You know, you can typically get about 65 watts out of a 100 watt panel. So yeah, that would be kind of perfect. You know, maybe slightly over paneling it, but to ensure that you can get those 120 watts. Now for USB, we do get 4 One of them, one of the USB-A's is a quick charge, although they do note that if you want the quick charge feature, you can only use that one port. You know, if you use any of the other USB-A's at the same time, it's going to reduce the power, you know, disperse it between the three. But we do get in and out 100 watt USB-C. So this is actually, you know, quite nice, and you can use that in combination with the other DC input. And then the screen, this is something I'm a little bit disappointed to see. I mean, it's actually a decent screen for a small power station, but the screen on the Tera 1000, their other model, was just excellent. And then obviously the overall design of this thing, as I mentioned, kind of just a cheap, generic, basic looking unit. You know, one thing to note though is that, you know, because one of the things that does make this thing look so cheap is just in generic is you don't see a brand name on here, but actually it is on the top handle there. So they do have that, you know, you can't see it from the front. So that does help a little bit. And the handle design is interesting. It's very similar to what we saw in the Tera 1000. It's just not as good. So the Tera 1000 had this very unique handle design. I think it's the only power station I've seen with this design, where basically it does have a flat top, but it has one handle that's kind of set into the top of the power station, and a nice like silicone rubber coating on it as well, just for good grip. So I really wish we could have seen that on this power station. It's just a really nice design, and obviously it's better to have the flat top than this has a little bit of arch to it, right? So yeah, kind of a cool little power station from 70Mi here. I think it's definitely cooler than what it looks like at first blush. People don't want a lot of fan noise. They don't want the battery to drain off fast, right? That low energy Bluetooth, smaller inverter, NMC battery is going to hold their charge better, right? So there is still a lot to like with this unit. And something worth considering, I think. So especially if you're a fan of LED lights. So yeah, hopefully I just kind of found this overview helpful. And yeah, thanks for watching.